A Passion for Mushrooms by Chrononautical. Chapter 6. The Gentle Hobbit Farmer. If Bilbo got a late start the morning after the great mushroom feast, he could hardly be blamed. After dessert, there had been music, dancing, and ale. Now, a hobbit could hold his ale as well as any dwarf, but the fact remained that Bilbo had indulged a bit more than he usually would have. It was just such a relief to be staying. So, if he laid abed past breakfast, feeling the warm sun on his face through his tiny window, it was only because he was lucky to have a window at all. He had been reliably informed the long porthole through tons of rock to the eastern slope of the mountain was the only window to the open air in the whole of the royal wing, so he might as well enjoy it. Anyway, it was nobody's business but his own. When time came for second breakfast, though, Bilbo levered himself out of bed. He had such a lot of work to do. A crust of bread, a mug of tea, and a quickly fried egg. That was all he needed to be on his way. An entire acre of black trilbies had been entrusted to his care. It was true that they didn't need much. The natural moisture of the cave and the composition of the stone clearly provided whatever the mushrooms needed to grow and thrive, but they did need harvesting. It was possible for trilbies to go overripe and spoil on the bud. Bilbo had at least a week of heavy work getting everything sorted so that his mushrooms would be nicely productive instead of overgrown and wild. If he got to work at once, he need not risk losing a single trilby. Of course, he could not get to work at once. Someone was waiting for him at the big stone doors to his new mushroom mine. Buffer, good morning. Hello, Bilbo. Hello. Have you come to see the mushrooms in their natural state? I should not have minded you opening the doors without me so long as you were careful not to step on any. Well, good. We would be delighted to view your lands with your Lord Baggins, but that is not why we have come. Lord Baggins? Whatever could you mean by that? There were no lords among hobbits, though the Thane is a relative of mine on the Took side. Well, there is a dwarf lord among them now, Beaufort said cheerfully, or do you not know what it means to own property within the mountain? I suppose I did not. Pray do not call me by a title, and we shall hope ignoring it makes it go away. Thorin might have warned me, though I suppose I was too distracted by the prospect of my lovely mushrooms to hear much last night. As you wish, my friend. I know you must be eager to survey your lands now that they are your own, but my brother and I thought we might ask a moment of your time this fine morning. Of course. Anything you need. You know I am ever at your service. Beaufort's smile grew warm and fond, and Bifur shared a knowing look with his brother. Aye, Bilbo, what aware of that? The older dwarf, who had only recently had part of an axe removed from his skull, said something in Cusdal that made Beaufort straighten up seriously, though still with a friendly sparkle in his eye. In any case, my brother and I happened to make the sign yesterday. Just an exercise in craftsmanship, you understand, but then we thought that we might be able to find a buyer for it if we headed down this way. Between them, the two dwarves hefted a long rectangle of obsidian, nearly as tall as they were, and as long as the two of them together, showing it to Bilbo. The face of the sign had bright gold calligraphy written in the Shire style, as though it had been Bilbo's own hand, holding a truly giant pen. It read, "The Mushroom Mine," as smoothly as if it was crafted with ink instead of beaten gold. Around the base of the sign were little mosaics of mushrooms made out of gemstones. Bright red toadstools were depicted in rubies and diamonds, springing up between blades of grass made of shining green peridot, comfortably surrounded by little brown button mushrooms formed from topaz. It was absolutely charming, all the more so for being crafted with typical dwarvish excess. "Oh, my friends!" Bilbo was quite speechless. "I am quite speechless. It is more beautiful than I can say." "Right," Beaufort said. "Fair's fair. You're a friend, and I won't overcharge you. I'll trade it to you for one of those brown fish you made last night, and Bifur wants some more of the potatoes." Laughing, Bilbo hugged them both. "It's a bargain. What's more, I'll make it a proper meal. Come to my apartment at the midday bell, and you'll have a lunch that puts last night's dinner to shame." Once the deal was agreed on by all parties, Bilbo was allowed to work with his mushrooms, accompanied by the pleasant sound of two dwarves efficiently hanging a sign over his brand-new door. Of course, such lunch plans took preparation, so Bilbo only had an hour or two to spend among his mushrooms. Still, every moment in that place was a pleasure. Bilbo followed the path down the center of his little farm that had been created by the two bumbling kitchen apprentices. As he did so, he was forced to admit, if only to himself, that its existence wasn't a complete tragedy. He might do well to put down flagstones of some material that the black trilbies could not take root in to preserve the path. As he left any overripe mushrooms to seed a new generation, if they would, the little places he could step safely might one day disappear. That would not suit, not when it was such a joy to crouch among them, carefully plucking the very best for use, and leaving the small to grow big. Even in spring, the smell of so many mushrooms always brought to mind the best parts of harvest time and plenty. A few stolen moments in the morning was not nearly enough time to spend with them. However, an hour and a half was enough time to fill a basket for himself and a barrel for Bomber's kitchen, taking only perfectly ripe trilbies. Indeed, the only part of his labor that could be called work was trying to drag the barrel to Bomber himself. Fortunately, one of the apprentices, the lamb-like lass who had had such trouble recognizing the differences between filleted fish the day before, popped up just before 11's on suspicion that Bilbo might need her. It was a bit embarrassing to watch the young girl lift the heavy thing easily, especially when she and Bilbo were almost of a height, but walking together gave Bilbo the opportunity to correct his earlier oversight in manners and get the Dwarvo dame's name. Finding out that Leah was only 63 was a bit of a surprise. She was barely of age in dwarvish terms, not at all the sort of person a hobbit would expect to find already working in the kitchen of a king. Still, dwarves were strange about some things. She would not under any circumstances call him Bilbo, but he did manage to talk her down to Master Baggins. Since they'd started the walk at Lord Master Burglar, Bilbo was quite willing to call that a success. Another success, this one for the Black Trilby more than the Hobbit personally, was that Bomber wanted to pay him for the mushrooms beyond simply trading a few items from his larder so that Bilbo could make a respectable luncheon for his friends. "You've proved the value, so take value for them," the Plumpkuk said jovially. In truth, Bilbo did not argue much against taking the coin. His funds over the course of the last year had been practically non-existent, and selling trilbies was a very respectable way to make a living. Though his money in the Shire came mostly from tenants and his inhabitants, he should not have been ashamed to open up a little mushroom shop if he had happened upon such wealth during his less adventurous days. Anyway, he could certainly use a new waistcoat or two if he was definitely settling in Edinburgh. He did not spend long in Bomber's kitchen, though his guilt at treating it like a grocery was mitigated by accepting an invitation to a private dinner at the recently constructed Guildhall. Not only would it give him a chance to have a proper talk with Bomber about how exactly one should go about selling produce in Erebor, other than directly to the royal kitchens, but the hobbit was curious about the guild. Anyone who lived among dwarves soon got the idea that guilds were rather important to them, of course. They seemed to be something of a cross between a regular pub and a group of people in the same profession. There was nothing at all like it in the Shire, but the clubs were very important to dwarves. Bilbo knew, without knowing quite how he knew, that Dory was part of a guild of weavers, for instance. Bifur and Bolfor belonged to the guild of artisans, but Bolfor was also somehow a miner. There was a merchant's guild for Gloin, a healer's guild for Oin, and a guild of scribes for Ori. It was strange that Bomber had asked for a guild hall as part of his contract, but it was even more unusual to Bilbo's mind that the hobbit had no idea what guild the cook belonged to. If there was a guild of chefs, it didn't seem to be something people spoke of. Still, Bilbo's curiosity could wait. There was something much more important to see to. Lunch! When Bifur and Bolfor knocked at Bilbo's door precisely at noon, they found trout and potatoes as requested. They also found Baggins' black bread, egg and mushroom puffs, sweet candied carrots, spicy mushroom crostini with fresh goat cheese, stuffed mushrooms, watercress soup with mushrooms, and little strawberry shortcakes for afters. It was a lovely luncheon, if Bilbo said so himself, with lots of dishes to sample and plenty of everything. Afterwards, the brothers kicked back in their chairs and claimed they could not move for having eaten so much. "I think we got the better end of the deal, Bifur," Bolfor said. Aye, good God." "Nonsense," Bilbo said. "It was so very kind of you to make my little mine a sign like that. Of course it is far too grand for me, but it is just right for Edinburgh. I feel almost dwarvish to earn it. Yet it is in the Shire style, and it is designed for mushrooms, and I shall never find the right words to tell you how it makes me feel quite at home, like I belong here." Beaufort's smile was soft and warm. "Good Lord, Bilbo, we all belong here." And if the words were an echo of other words said in despair on the side of another more dangerous mountain, they were not less powerful for that. Hugging them both was simply necessary then, as was making a nice pot of digestive tea. Of course, lingering all day over lunch was a luxury they did not even contemplate. Erebor needed 2 of its finest craftsmen to aid in the rebuilding efforts, and Bilbo needed to get back to his mushrooms. They really were quite lovely, a thick living carpet over the cold stone of the cave chamber. Where they were too crowded, he thinned them to make room. Where they were plump and perfect, he harvested them happily. And where the black trilbies were overripe, he gently encouraged them to go to seed in a few unpopulated directions. Of course, they would only spread with a great deal of luck, but it didn't hurt to nudge things along in his favor. By the end of the day, he had 9 big barrels of perfect trilbies and plenty of ideas about what to do with them. The riches of Erebor indeed!